Hi there, this is Solid Ronan from Solid Ronan Films, and welcome to the second episode of my Global Director Challenge. I've done my favourite 10 British directors, with 5 going through to the next level. So I'm now going to do my favourite 10 Italian directors. Now, 10 years ago, before I started this channel, my list of Italian directors wouldn't be as long as it was as now. I was almost going to do my favourite 40 ranked episode on Italian directors, but I was kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel to get to 40. So this was actually pretty tough. I think the hardest positions are spot number 5, which means you go through to the next level, and obviously spot number 10, because there's a lot of directors that unfortunately you have to leave out. So it was really a tough decision at 10, but I'll get to that once I've finished going through my top 10. Now, I've learned a lot about Italian cinema. The fact that quite a lot of Italian films are actually about the north-south divide. And it's amazing when you think of so many countries in the world, how much there is a north-south divide, or in some cases an east-west divide. But we as a people just can't help but be divided, and you certainly see it in Italian cinema, between the rich, cultured north and the poorer, more working class south in generalistic terms. So for 10, as I said, it was difficult. It was between probably about 5 different directors, but I've went for a director that, very much like Kurosawa and the number 1 on this list, was a bit of a gateway for some people into Italian cinema, and that's Vittorio De Sica with Bicycle Thieves, which again is one of those kind of flagpole world, i.e. outside of English language, one of those flagpole world cinema titles that you kind of had to see if you were getting into non-English cinema, you know, like Seven Samurai and the 400 Blows, you know, Bicycle Thieves was kind of, you know, and the Seven Seal. Bicycle Thieves was that kind of film. It's not one of my favourites. It's still obviously very good and very important in Italian neorealism, and also bringing people in to Italian cinema. But I'm actually, from now on, I'm just going to pick a couple of titles for each director, so apologies to all you British directors out there. So here we've got 2 women, with Sophia Loren actually giving a really good meaty performance, and Umberto D, a film that I only saw relatively recently. Again, I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but I would certainly say it's very, 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 very good. So that's number 10, De Sica, which again was very difficult. Number 9, I need to see more of his films. I've only maybe seen half a dozen, but they're pretty big. I've got the other BFI set to finish. I guess he's one of the big Italian directors, because you won't see too many of the big Italian directors. because as you may know, I don't tend to go for directors that I should actually love, because sometimes the ones that you should love aren't the ones you love. But it's Rossellini. This is the War trilogy, which is just phenomenal. The weakest one is probably Paisan or Paisa, and it's still like a 4-star film. Rome Open City is an absolute masterwork, as is Germany Year Zero, which is kind of unique in taking cameras to Germany pretty much still a couple of years after the war. Lots of extras, and just, if you're going to watch one Rossellini film, Rome Open City is just absolutely phenomenal, and a lot more brutal than you think it will be for a film made in 1945. At number 8 is another one of the big names. I mean, again, I've still got a couple in the backlog. I've still got a couple to re-watch, which I haven't seen for decades probably. But I actually went for Visconti. This is Death in Venice with Dirk Bogarde, another wonderful late career Dirk Bogarde performance. And this is The Damned, again with a wonderful Dirk Bogarde performance. This also has Ingrid Thulin as well, who's magnificent. Helmut Berger. Yeah, Visconti does decay very well. Obviously not always to this extreme, but it's definitely a class to Visconti, but there's also the kind of corruption and decay underneath it. I've still got The Leopard to rewatch. I watched that decades ago, and I've got Ludwig in the backlog to watch. But Visconti, out of the other big directors, he's the one that I can kind of see the greatness in, whereas the other ones perhaps I can't really see the greatness, but then that's maybe just my eyesight. And then at number 7, possibly too high for some people, but I don't think you can undervalue his importance. It's Mario Bava, who again people might dismiss as just a genre director, but genre is quite important, and he is rather influential. How many times have I done a random review and said that the film has Bava lighting and everybody knows what you're talking about? Yeah, in the horror sphere or the sci-fi sphere with Planet of the Vampires, which is just seminal. Look at all that semen there. Yeah, colour, aesthetic, low budget, but managing to create atmospheric little mind worms of films. Again, some of his films are better than others, as most directors are, but I think Bava deserves a place in my favourite 10 Italian filmmakers. Again, this is favourite, this is not who I think are the greatest. So at number 6, and again I did say spot 10 and spot 5 are the hardest ones, so just missing out on the next level, it might be controversial, but it's Sergio Corbucci. Yeah, I need to see more Corbucci's. He's one of those directors you think you've seen more than you actually have. This is The Mercenary, of course Franco Nero, who of course he worked with on Django, which is absolutely seminal. But I think The Great Silence is actually more seminal. There's more semen in The Great Silence than Django. Klaus Kinski, Jean-Louis Trintignant. I mean, we grew up with Jean-Louis Trintignant in quote art house films, and he is playing a mute gunman in a western made in 1968, the same year as Once Upon a Time in the West. What a double bill that is. Yeah, it's so unusual for a western, an interracial relationship, a mute gunfighter, in the snow. Yeah, not a lot of westerns look or sound like The Great Silence, and this is certainly probably in my top 5 westerns of all time. So that's Corbucci, just missing out. But again, these could easily flip between 6 and 5. So at number 5, I went with Giuseppe Tornatore, which again might be controversial. But at the end of the day, Corbucci doesn't have a film with Monica Bellucci in it, which is quite hard to say. Again, this has got a Morricone soundtrack. But really, the film that put it over the top is Legend 1900. I don't know why this isn't in like the Criterion or something. This is an Italian Blu-ray, as you may have guessed, with the extended version. Please watch the extended version. It makes it even greater. Again, it's a completely daft premise, but Tim Roth as a little boy. Well, Tim Roth doesn't play a little boy. The little boy grows up to be Tim Roth, who is on an ocean liner for his entire life playing the piano as it crosses the Atlantic. It's just absolutely wonderful. It's a film that, again, shouldn't really work, but it just is absolutely beautiful. One, Morricone again. I think Morricone is pretty much in all 10 entries. Yeah, it's Morricone's kind of low-key best score. Yeah, I just absolutely adore this film, even though, again, people might think it's a bit daft and silly, but it's just so wonderful. Tornatore's also obviously got Cinema Paradiso, which, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of. He's got the bestseller with Geoffrey Rush, best offer, sorry, with Geoffrey Rush, Unknown Woman, which is a kind of Hitchcock homage. I've got a couple more of his in the backlog as well. So Tornatore just pips Sergio Corbucci. And number 4 is one that, again, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have in this list. But again, thanks to the wonderful power of the internet and the wonderful power of Radiance, it's Damiano Damiani. This is Bullet for the General with Volonte and Kinski, and don't forget Martin Beswick. This is again one of the more political westerns. Obviously Corbucci was fairly political as well. Sergio Solima is fairly political. So again, people who go, oh yeah, westerns are not really about anything. Lots of spaghetti westerns were about politics. But obviously Volonte is fantastic. And we all like a bit of Klaus Kinski as well. But really, as I said, Radiance, I think they've got maybe 5 or 6 Damianis, including this Cosa Nostra set with Franco Nero, and all 3 films directed by Damiani. The Day of the Owl is wonderful, The Case is Closed, Forget It. It's awesome, and How to Kill a Judge is educational. Yeah, so Damiani has pretty much almost come from nowhere into number 4 spot. Number 3 and 2 were difficult, but at number 3 I went for Elio Petri. This is The 10th Victim with Ursula Andress bikini gun ensemble, with a blonde Mastriani. It's basically a wonderful death game satire, slightly science fiction. But then to counter that, we're back to Radiance for The Working Class Goes to Heaven, which is aptly spine number 1, aka Lulu the Tool. Again starring Volonte, that is most wonderful. Again, another score by Morricone. It's almost as if Morricone and Italian cinema kind of go hand in hand or something. Obviously, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicions, a masterpiece. Property is No Longer a Theft is a masterpiece. This is a noisy masterwork about how workers are literally just part of the machinery. Morricone does a really atonal, noisy, bangy score, which is fits brilliantly with the rest of the film. Sadly, Petrie is another one of those directors that died way too young, like Murnau and Paul Lenny and several others that I can't name at the moment. So Petrie comes in at number 3, which obviously means number 2 is Francesco Rossi with Illustrious Corpses, which again is just one of the greatest titles of all time. Lino Ventura and Max von Sydow, about judges being killed again. I don't know what this common theme in Italy with judges being killed, and his just ridiculously good, but nobody knows why. Christ Stopped at Eboli, again with Volonte. Yeah, almost 4 hours, but it's just so engrossing as Volonte is a political prisoner just sent out into country to exile in this small little village and just walks about for 4 hours. It sounds like a popcorn fan's dream film, but again, it's just the magic of cinema, how this actually works, but it does. Rossi did lots of different things. I've seen quite a lot of his stuff. I do have his version of Carmen still in the backlog. I've kind of left that for last for obvious reasons, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, Rossi, again, as you may have guessed, I'm not really into the big Italian directors, the big 4, the big famous ones, if you like. You know, Visconti and Rossellini are pretty up there. Now, obviously, the number 1, I do realise that my number 1s are probably quite predictable, but there's for a reason for that, because this is favourites. This is not who I think is the best, because my number 1 would probably not be number 1. But you have to remember, growing up, well, I saw particularly one of his films probably about 20 times before I even was a film fan. It is, of course, predictably, it's Sergio Leone. Not Once Upon a Time in the West did I see 20 times. That came a lot later, because for some reason this just wasn't on the television in Britain for some reason, for a lot of years. And here's a film that has grown on me for a few dollars more. My favourite out of the trilogy is still The Good, the Bad and Ugly, and that's the film that I saw probably about 20 times before I even was a film fan. But for a few dollars more, it isn't that far off. Fistful of Dollars is certainly the weakest out of the 3, probably by quite a bit, to be fair. But Volonte, Lee Van Cleef are absolutely seminal in this. Oh yeah, and Clint Eastwood's in it as well. So this is a perfect example of favourites over the greatest. Yes, Sergio Leone films are in English, so is he in Italian? Of course he's in Italian. And yes, you could say, well, it's from a male perspective. You know, I'm not sure how many women absolutely adore Sergio Leone films. It's a male thing. You know, women don't really feature too much in Sergio Leone films. They're usually just there to be slapped about or shot or whatever, apart from Claudia Cardinale, who's obviously fairly pivotal, but even then she gets her bottom spanked, which some reviewers absolutely hate and give the film 1 star because somebody smacks Claudia Cardinale's bottom. But I can't imagine my life without Sergio Leone films. And again, you could say he's the most mainstream. You know, he was the one that was the most popular, but sometimes the most popular is just because it's good. You know, we all like obscure directors that nobody watches, and we kind of poo-hoo directors that people love. But there's a reason that Leone's films are really popular. You know, you could argue he's the least political out of the spaghetti western directors, or the directors that came up with spaghetti westerns, but Once Upon a Time in a Revolution or Duck You Sucker or A Fistful of Dynamite, It's probably his most political. You know, the scene in the massacre in the grotto was really about the massacre by the Nazis in World War II of this little town. So yeah, I mean, my number one might be predictable with Sergio Leone, but his films, you know, my life wouldn't be the same. I don't think anybody's life would be the same without watching Sergio Leone film. I mean, The Good, the Bad and Ugly for me still has the best kind of male relationship, as far as three people who respect each other, who quite happily kill each other without thinking about it, but they also respect each other. It's wonderfully sadistic, as they all have these kind of little death games amongst themselves. Obviously, what would Leone be without Morricone? Yep, I think the number one in this isn't actually any director, it's actually Morricone. Yeah, again, imagine a life without hearing a Morricone score. That's pretty depressing. So yes, my number one is predictable. Most of my number ones are going to be a bit predictable, I apologise for that. But obviously let's talk about some of the directors who didn't make it. Now Mario Monicelli, I've only seen 2 of his films, and one of them was in a compilation, an anthology. The Organizer is a masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. Big Deal in Madonna Street is absolutely wonderful, but I just couldn't put him in just with 2 films. He was vying for number 10. Pasolini, again, was close at number 10. I do need to rewatch most of these films. I've seen just about all of them, but I need to rewatch them. If I do this again in a couple of years, that might change. Obviously Dario Argento, like Bava, another genre director. I don't love Argento as much as other people do, but I do enjoy his films. Again, I've only seen like 35% of them. I've only seen the big ones, if you like. I know he does have a bit of a drop off, and again, I really need to rewatch them. You know, I'm that weirdo who my favourite Argento is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Fellini, obviously, I think when I was going to do my top 40, he didn't even make the top 30. I don't know, I just have a thing with Fellini. Maybe it's just my preconceptions of him were just too much to overcome, and he is exactly what I thought he was. Again, I've only seen 5 of his films, but again, it's 5 of his bigger films, and again, they're good films, but they just don't float my boat. I don't see the greatness personally, even though obviously everybody loves Fellini. And Antonioni, I mean, Antonioni, out of, you know, that kind of group of big ones, he almost made it. I don't love any Antonionis, but I think I've now seen 6 or 7, and there's enough in them for me to keep them and rewatch them, whereas I'm not necessarily going to do that with Fellini, and I'm happy to watch more Antonioni, which again, I'll get to Fellini once I've done a lot of more work than everybody else. So Antonioni was close, but the films that I've seen of De Sica I just think are better. But again, Antonioni is the one that might change as I watch more of his films and rewatch the ones that I have. So I'll kind of give Antonioni the benefit of the doubt. So he would probably be number 11. Obviously 11 doesn't cut it, and neither does 10 to 6 for that matter, but that's just my thinking, not that anybody really wants to know how I think. So I apologise to the directors that didn't make it and their families and fans. So Tornatore, Damiani, Pitre Rossi and Leone all moved to the next level. But there's no shame for Corbucci and Bava and De Sica, Rossellini and Visconti. They can go home with their heads held high, and Antonioni can go home thinking, well, I was the best loser at spot number 11. So thanks so much for watching, but as usual I would quite like you to give me your favourite 10 or 5 Italian directors. I know the Bulgarian Troglodyte has done the British list, so please go over to his channel and subscribe, because he'll have far more educated list. I'm sure Antonioni and Fellini will be on his list and probably quite high. But you can't like everything. I mean, if everybody's top 10s or favourite 10s were exactly the same, it would be a little bit odd. Yeah, this is just my favourite 10 Italian directors, and what do I know? Very little. So thanks very much for watching. Again, please let me know your favourite couple of Italian directors even, and hopefully you'll join me again. Now, what is the next country or area of the world that I'll be going to next? I might as well make it easy and go to France next. That was an easy list to make as well. Not really. So thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you'll join me again for France. They haven't been making films for that long, have they? Yeah, maybe just a wee while. So thanks so much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell